Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars talking all things BYU every day. We have talked about how BYU was slighted by being a 6 seed, but it was also brought up. It's been brought up in Big 12 squad shows and on my show how BYU does not play on Sundays due to religious affiliation. They're the flagship university of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the question is posed here that while we're all excited, BYU is going dancing, they're going to play in March Madness, they fall into a 6 seed. They fall into a spot where they can't play on Sundays. They fall in Denver. Could any of this be related? Is any of this tied to BYU's affiliation with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Now, if this were 10, 15 years ago, Drake, I would say absolutely it's related to BYU and the LDS Church affiliation. But since that time, the NCAA Selection Committee has actually been able to gerrymander and move brackets around, move teams to different venues, whatever it is, to accommodate things like BYU's no Sunday play issue. So I look at it, and ever so slightly, were they maybe downgraded from maybe that last 5 seed to the top 6 seed because of religious affiliation? I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's more due to the fact that they're just simply trying to find slots to put BYU in. And if you were to tell me, Drake, it was playing at maybe, and this is all hypothetical at this point, potentially playing a 5 seed and playing in the likes of Lexington or a Providence, Rhode Island, that type of location versus being a 6 seed and playing in Denver, which is an hour and 20 plane minute ride away from home, I will take that 6 seed in that circumstance. I just don't necessarily buy in this day and age the religious affiliation downgrade.
Now, could that be a more of a conversation than a BYU not being able to play on Sundays, which might I add, as someone who's not a member of the faith, but speaks very frequently about the faith because it is such a pillar for BYU, a pillar of their success in the Big 12 as well, because the rallying point worldwide where Cougars, who are a part of the LDS Church, are able to celebrate BYU and its accomplishments as something that helps spearhead that church's movement across the world. As someone, again, not a part of the faith, but happy to advocate for the positive things it brings to the Big 12, them not playing on Sundays is a great way to stand your ground and say, look, we are a religious institution that takes it seriously enough. We will not forfeit this piece of what we're committed to. And the NCAA has now said, look, yes, we'll give you that. BYU wasn't going to fold. Eventually, the powers that be had to for the NCAA and governing bodies in college athletics. But the question goes back to, because of that, Jake, and you kind of alluded to this, but I want to go a bit deeper there. Because of not being able to play on Sundays, if BYU could feasibly play on a Sunday, does that mean they're a 4 seed or a 5 seed here, right? Because you take it intrinsically, it's tied to the LDS faith, not really right down the middle, the reason, but because of the Sunday rule, is this why BYU is a 6?
Maybe that, okay, when you put it in that light, Drake, I agree with you in that respect, because it easily could be that where if they had more flexibility, yeah, sure, the selection committee may have said, hey, we can work them into the 5 or 4 line here because they could play a Friday, Sunday situation. This goes back multiple decades, Drake, but there was a push at one point for the NCAA to essentially end all religious exemptions in the case of like a BYU or no Sunday play. They would have just said, hey, if you can't play on Sunday, tough noogies, and you're going to have to just deal with it. But BYU had multiple other universities who owed them no favors step up to the plate and say, no, BYU stands their ground on this. We're going to back them up on this. If they don't want to play on Sunday, make the exemption, put it in the bylaws. And that's been on the books for decades now for the NCAA. BYU will stand that ground until the end of time, Drake. They are not going to budge on it. They've had their rugby team, for example, which is a club sport. I understand that, but their rugby team for multiple decades was unable to win a national championship despite being one of the premier rugby programs across the country, because simply put, the tournament and the final for the rugby national championship was on a Sunday. They wouldn't budge off of it. BYU said, hey, we'll participate, but if we make it to the championship, it's on a Sunday, we'll forfeit. And they did that multiple times. So the light you painted in there, I agree with you. Maybe if they did have that flexibility, hypothetically, yeah, they probably could have found themselves a little bit maybe higher up on the seed line, but I don't think BYU minds standing their ground and doing what they've always done.
I've heard a lot of BYU fans mention as the time has gone on since this was all announced that being a 6 seed, especially in Denver, is actually pretty similar to being a 3 seed. So, it's as gross as it is to be a 6 seed again for BYU. I know there are a lot of war stories that come with that. Being
Well,
on that line again, is it the same as a 3 seed?
It's gonna worry some Cougar fans, obviously, because what happened against Duquesne last year. Obviously, there's just bad memories of them they had a record spread last year. It was 11.5, I think, was the spread at tip-off in that game. The biggest spread for a 6-11 matchup in NCAA tournament history, Drake. And we all know what happened. It was just an awful result for BYU, a one and done situation once again. I get that there's some of those battle scars that exist because of that, but I'm telling you, if they can find, and we said this earlier on in the podcast, they can find a way past this VCU squad. I feel a lot more confident for BYU against Wisconsin than I do against VCU, and that's crazy to say when it's an 11 versus a 3 seed.
Yeah. Kevin Young and what he's brought to BYU here. I mean, I see BYU fans that are still following Mark Pope at Kentucky. They're still following kind of his every move, and they're monitoring him. That situation, the way it ended, the guy who comes in and helps lead a great team, loses to Duquesne, leaves for Kentucky as their like 8th option. For BYU fans, what is Kevin Young bringing to the program that this basketball team has never had before?
Elite talent, first off, because BYU's had some pretty good teams in their history, Drake, but they have never had the number 1 recruit in the recruiting class. And I know that's next year with AJ DeBonsa coming to BYU, but the likes of Jaeger Demon and Cannon Catchings are recruits BYU fans always dreamed of having, but never in their heart of hearts were like, hey, that's a realistic possibility for us. Those are guys on this year's team. That's the one thing is he brings a street cred and a recruiting profile that no other BYU coach I feel like can match. He can go out and get essentially anybody he puts his mind to. When he proved he could get AJ DeBonsa to sign with BYU, Stephen A. Smith's face when he announced that on First Take told me everything I needed to know. He was like, are you kidding me? BYU? And it's shown that Kevin Young, his relationships in basketball with pro players like guys like Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, the fact that he can have them on speed dial, put them on the phone with any recruit that wants to, think about what Joel Embiid thinks about me being a good coach. And you can call up Joel Embiid for a big man and say, hey, Joel, tell this kid what I can do for him in his basketball career. And Joel Embiid will speak glowingly of Kevin Young. That is a major, major tool to have in your back pocket if you're Kevin Young. So the number one thing he's brought is that elite talent base. The other thing I will say is Kevin Young brings a demeanor and it's almost an attitude of, hey, past results be damned. We're going to go out there and do our thing. And I can respect it. It can almost borderline look like they're being cocky when they talk about stuff like that, Drake. But I love the boldness that he approaches his side of the game from.
Yeah, Jake, faith standpoint, culture standpoint as well. I know that's something that is so important to those at BYU. What has Kevin Young brought into the fold that is, and I say brought intentionally, what has he brought into the fold that helps maintain long-term culture at BYU in the athletics department?
I think he's trying to obviously prove that he can send guys to the NBA from BYU. Now, there have been guys who've gone to the NBA from BYU in the past, but we're talking he wants to have lottery-type selections every single year coming out of Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. But he also understands this is a faith-based institution, as we already talked about. They will not bend on certain things that they hold near and dear to their hearts. They're non-negotiables in BYU and the way that the BYU athletics department will always operate. He's trying to meld those two things, and I respect the way he's gone about it. He is bold to the point of saying, we don't care about our past failures in the recent past in the NCAA tournament. We're a new team. We're going to go out there and prove ourselves on that national stage. But at the same time, he also understands that BYU is a faith-based institution and may, frankly, not be for everybody, and he will find the right guys that fit what BYU is all about.
Jake, beautiful stuff today. I know that over the last couple of days, BYU fans have been a bit torn up over the way that things shook out on Sunday, but here you are with a chance as good as anybody, of the 68 teams to make it all the way to glory and win a national championship. Jake, where can folks, listeners of Locked On Big 12 specifically, find more of your work?
Yeah, I just search out Locked On Cougars wherever you get your podcasts, also available on YouTube. If you want to follow us on social media, Locked On Cougars on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And you can see right here, it's actually our new graphics don't have it. My personal Twitter feed on or X is Jacob C. Hatch. You can hit me up there. I love to chat anytime with anybody who wants to talk ball.
That's Jake Hatch. This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day, a crossover with Cougars and Dose Grande.